Crafts and Industries. India has a heritage of crafts since the times of Indus Valley civilization. Craft means making objects in metalwork, iron carving, stone carving, basketry, matting, etc. Many of these crafts assumed classical form while others still continue as folk art. Indian crafts flourished during the Mughal period. Cotton textiles were the most important, and around 150 types of fabrics were produced. Emperor Akbar encouraged the production of silk, and Bengal became a very important center for raw silk. The craftsmen's home became the workshop. Many of them settled in large numbers in and around the centers of export along the coast, trade centers, and in European factory towns. Craftsmanship achieved high level of efficiency. Trivia: before arrival of British in India, our country was well developed in industrial and manufacturing activities. In the pre-British era, the artisans mainly catered to the needs of village community, while in big towns there were craftsmen who were patronized by local rulers and nobles. These craftsmen produced luxury goods for the traders who sold them to other countries. There was a great demand for items like woolen, silk, and cotton textiles, jute, saltpeter, opium, spices, etc. in Europe. The fine cotton cloth, especially the Dhaka muslin, were in great demand all over the world. The industries in town were well organized in guilds, which provided protection and also regulated the prices and quality of goods. As the Mughal Empire became weak, urban skilled craftsmen flourished in regional centers like Banaras, Patna, Surat, Lucknow, Jhansi, Gwalior, etc. Each of these specialized in a particular craft. But things changed with the arrival of European trading company. The period of modern imperialist expansion was marked in India by an intensification of British exploitation and a corresponding change in its character, in which the capitalist exploitation of India came to dominate all other methods. Nevertheless, the new methods of exploitation did not replace the already established forms of plunder, industrial and trading mistreatment, but were supplementary to these processes. Trivia: the new factories were built near canals and railways so that materials could be delivered and finished goods be taken away. Decline of handicrafts. The Indian handicrafts faced a sharp decline with the advent of British from the 19th century. East India Company began to monopolize the artisans and started dictating its own terms to the craftsmen. The commercial policies of the British government were largely influenced by the imperialistic regime in India. During the later half of 18th century and the first half of 19th century, British underwent profound socio-economic transformation due to Industrial Revolution, and the British industry developed and expanded rapidly on the basis of modern machines, factory system and capitalism. By means of imperialism, British also captured and monopolized the markets in Asia and Africa. It now had a strong industrial class in whose interest manufactured goods were exported to vast markets provided in the form of colonies. Thus, the British government followed a policy of free trade or unrestricted entry of British goods in India in the 19th century. The Indian handicrafts were exposed to an unequal competition of machine-made goods from the British. The Indian handmade goods were unable to compete with the much cheaper machine-made foreign products. The Indian products which competed with the British products were subjected to heavy duties when exported. The duties on some of these exports were as high as 400%. This led to the decline of Indian export market. The desire for raw materials to keep the British Industrial Revolution going led to these drastic measures. The British commercial policy was guided by the needs of the British industry, with the main aim of selling British goods and a regular supply of raw materials. Some of the factors that led to the downfall of Indian industries are these: imposition of heavy duties on Indian imports, the British policy of free trade in India, exporting raw materials from India in large quantities, oppression of weavers as they were paid less amount than the usual price, the unfair competition with British machine-made goods, callous attitude of British administration towards Indian weavers. Trivia: clothing fibers in Mughal dynasty included muslins of three types: Abbe Ravan, running water, Baft Hawa, woven air, and Shabnam, evening dew. The Industrial Revolution. In the early medieval period, non-agricultural goods were produced in rural households in England. Later, when towns grew, goods began to be made in crafts guild. As this method did not satisfy the growing demands of goods, a new method called domestic system came up. The production units were still located in houses, but now merchants supplied raw materials to these units. The craftsmen used simple tools to produce finished goods, which were then collected by the same merchant who sold them in the market. Even this system was inadequate to keep up with the demand. Meanwhile, many new machines were invented like the steam engine, the spinning jenny, cotton gin, and power loom. So, a new system of production called factory system arose. The workers went to work in a building called factory, owned by a capitalist. They were paid wages by the capitalist. Production was carried on with the help of a large number of machines, mainly run by steam power. This shift of production by machines led to the advent of machine age. Production was multiplied by many times. The series of industrial and technological changes that began in the late 18th century, resulting in cheap and efficient mass production of different types of goods, came to be known as Industrial Revolution. As a result of the Industrial Revolution, rate of production went up. New goods were produced. More people were able to afford goods which were termed as luxury goods. There was large-scale migration of people from villages to towns as employment opportunities expanded, wages increased, and more leisure time was available. As people crowded in towns, their living conditions became deplorable with problems of housing and sanitation. Poor sewerage system led to epidemics. Women and children were employed in large numbers in factories with no safety standards. Men, women and children worked for long hours and with poor wages. There was no security of jobs and if the machines went out of order, the workers had to work even longer hours. The Industrial Revolution brought nations together through developments in the transport and communication system. Before the revolution, India had supplied finished goods to England, but things changed with the Industrial Revolution. The search for raw materials, markets and cheap labor began by the industrialized European countries. The machines worked faster and demanded more and more raw materials. They also produced these products which needed to be sold in the world market. With this, the trading depots expanded into colonies. The European powers then took over the political control of these countries so that they could have monopoly over trade and commerce. They also wanted to control the economic policies of these countries. This is how an era of imperialism began with the advent of the 19th century. These changes took place as a result of British conquest of India. After 1757, more and more areas came under the direct control of the company. To help the British-made goods reach the interiors of India and to procure raw materials, roads were improved and canals were made suitable for steamboats. But it was the railway network crisscrossing India that changed the face of India. It helped the movements of goods, troops and people. With the building of Suez Canal, India came closer to England and it became cheaper to bring British goods to India. Since these were machine-made goods, they were cheaper than the handmade products produced by our craftsmen, so they drove our artisans out of business. What damaged the most of our indigenous industries was free trade. It meant movement of goods between countries without payment of duties or customs. One way free trade meant that British goods coming into India paid no duties, while Indian goods entering England were made to pay prohibitive duties. This was the demand from the rising manufacturing class of England, who put a lot of pressure on the British government to follow this policy. Thus, the Indian import into England was discouraged and the British goods into India were encouraged. In 1813, the British government abolished the monopoly of the company to trade in India and the East. It now opened its trades to all British subjects. The Indian handmade goods were unable to compete against the much cheaper products of British mills. The factories used better techniques and steam power. Soon British goods started flooding in Indian markets. At the same time, Indian goods were sent to Britain faced heavy duties. Growth of modern industries. The British government gave priority to jute textiles, coal mining and cotton textiles industry. The first jute mill was established with British capital in Bengal, which was followed by setting up of jute mills at other places. Coal mining also flourished in India as it was an attractive business for British investors. There was a great demand of coal in railways and factories. Coal and iron ores are essential for the establishment of iron and steel industry. But the same could not be done as British government placed several restrictions on it. It was only in 1907 that Jamshedji Tata set up an iron and steel company at Jamshedpur. Due to several restrictions imposed by the British, the heavy industries could not develop at the required pace in India. Cotton textile industry, however, grew rapidly in the second half of the 19th century. The first textile mill was set up at Bombay in 1853. Later, many textile mills were set up at various places like Ahmedabad, Madras, Bengal, Sholapur, Nagpur, etc. By the turn of the century, India had more than 200 cotton textile mills. Just before the First World War, India ranked fourth among the textile producing countries in the world. Although there was an intense competition from Britain and Japan, the Indian industry developed at a fast pace. Modern industries led to the unemployment of thousands of craftsmen and artisans of India. They had no other alternative but to become workers in big factories. Industrial development in India was lopsided as industries were localized in a few big cities, while the remaining part remained semi-developed and undeveloped. Heavy industries were largely neglected. It created an impediment for the growth of other industries too. Machinery and technology was imported from outside. Plantation industry was wholly owned by the foreigners, and Indians were mere workers in these plantations. The British gave an unfair motherly treatment to the indigenous industries. They did not give any encouragement or protection to the Indian industries. For example, the traditional and flourishing handloom industry of India suffered a decline due to imported foreign textiles. In comparison to foreign goods, higher freights were charged on the Indian goods. The British did not provide the benefit of banking, insurance, loan, etc. to the Indian industries. As a result of industrialization, two new social classes emerged in India, the capitalists and workers. Since their interests clashed with each other, the gulf between the two classes widened. The slow pace of industrialization in India resulted in the backwardness of the country's economy. Textiles, the discovery of several cotton stuck to a silver, the spinning and weaving to the Harappans. Weaving are found in Vedic methods of spinning. The Indian textile trade began as early as a hoard of found in the tombs Egypt are the proof of export of cotton textiles 2 times. Initial finds include processing cotton into cloth woven, madder-dyed. Surviving from these early sites stitched and their design of either embroidery, many Indian texts to the textile techniques and further documenting knowledge of the sophistication of textiles comes from the paintings of they verify that the weave with decorative designs and tie-dye in Indian society. History, notable might affected the textile. Many of these people, which have a cold climate, their sewn garments, made fabrics during Jamdani and Muslim began to be. Many Persian India who provided techniques. Aleppo Mashru was the introduction of Europeans. Textile terms like calico, muslin, etc. entered the European languages. The player in the world exports in the early 18th century of the 19th century its export market trade. While India percent of world industry 50, it had sent by 1900. British policies were a kind. Cloth played in our independence movements in Ahmedabad and Bombay. Mahatma Gandhi hand spinning of cotton villagers to earn extra urban middle classes to groups and artisans. In India have now established manufacturing industry more workers than in textile industry of major reorientation application of textiles. The of handicrafted textiles unmatched anywhere in export market is Russia, former Soviet republics. It forms the largest part of textile industry. India's garment export trivia. Straw manufacturing textile. Trivia. 1 yard of Dhaka muslin 10 grams. The poly was done using conch not ironed. It finer.